Introduction. There's this moment that almost everyone has experienced. You open your banking app, maybe while you're standing in line for coffee, or sitting in your car before work, or honestly just lying in bed late at night when your brain decides it's the perfect time to think about money, and you look at the number in your account. Maybe it's $213, maybe it's $74, maybe it's negative, and instantly your brain starts doing that thing. You know the thing. That quiet, slightly uncomfortable mental math. Okay. Rent is coming in a few days. Credit card bill is next week. Groceries. Gas. And suddenly money stops feeling like a tool. It starts feeling like pressure, like this invisible weight sitting somewhere in the back of your mind all the time. And what's interesting is, most people assume that stress only disappears once you become rich. Like once you're making six figures, or once your investments are big enough, or once you hit some magical number. But honestly, that's not where the biggest mental shift happens. Because the first time you save $5,000, something strange happens inside your brain. Not just financially, neurologically, psychologically. Your relationship with money begins to change in ways most people never expect. And this is the kind of thing I spend way too much time thinking about. My name is Nick, and I've always been fascinated by money. Not just how people make it, but how it changes the way we think, the way we behave, and even the way we see ourselves. Because $5,000 doesn't make you wealthy. Not even close. But it does something surprisingly powerful. It shifts your brain from survival mode to strategy mode. And once that switch flips, even just a little, it's really hard to go back to the way you used to think about money. So let's talk about why saving your first $5,000 quietly rewires your brain, and why that moment might be one of the most important financial turning points in your entire life. The brain finally leaves survival mode. When you live paycheck to paycheck, your brain operates a lot like it does during a crisis. It becomes incredibly focused on immediate problems. Can I pay this bill? Will this purchase overdraft my account? Can I make it to the next paycheck? Psychologists call this a scarcity mindset, and scarcity does something very specific to the brain. It narrows your thinking. When money is tight, your brain stops thinking about next year, or next month, or even next week sometimes. It zooms all the way in on right now. Imagine trying to plan a road trip while your car is running out of gas. You're not thinking about the destination. You're thinking about the nearest gas station. That's what financial scarcity feels like. But once you save $5,000, something subtle shifts. For the first time, your brain realizes, okay, if something goes wrong, I won't immediately collapse. Your car breaks down, you can fix it. Unexpected medical bill, you have a buffer. Your brain no longer has to panic at every small financial surprise, and that tiny bit of breathing room allows your mind to finally zoom out. Instead of reacting, you start planning. And that shift from reaction to strategy is where real financial growth begins. You stop seeing money as fragile. When you've never had savings before, money feels incredibly fragile, like it disappears instantly. You get paid, and within days, it's gone. Rent, groceries, gas, subscriptions, bills. Poof. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. But the first time you see $5,000 sitting in your account, something strange happens. Money suddenly feels more solid, more stable. You realize that money can actually stay. And that realization sounds simple, but psychologically it's huge, because before that moment, saving money can feel almost pointless. You might think, why bother saving $100? It'll just disappear eventually anyway. But when you see a real cushion building, your brain starts forming a new belief. Oh, money can accumulate, and beliefs shape behavior. Once your brain accepts that saving actually works, it becomes easier to keep doing it. That's why the first few $1,000s are often the hardest. After that, momentum begins to build. You start thinking in options instead of obligations. One of the quietest but most powerful psychological changes that happens around the $5,000 mark is that your brain starts thinking in options. Before savings, life feels very rigid. You have to keep your job. You have to say yes to extra shifts. You have to tolerate annoying situations. Because financially, you're stuck. But a small financial cushion, even a few $1,000s, creates something incredibly powerful. Time. If your boss becomes unbearable, you could leave. If you want to look for a better job, you have breathing room. If an opportunity appears, you might actually be able to take it. And suddenly life feels less like a cage and more like a set of choices. Now, to be clear, $5,000 isn't financial freedom, but it's psychological freedom. And sometimes that's the first step toward real freedom. Your brain starts playing the long game. There's another strange shift that happens when savings grow. Your brain begins thinking further into the future. When people have no savings, the future feels abstract, kind of like a blurry concept. Retirement, investing, financial independence, those things feel like they belong to some other version of life. But once you've saved $5,000, something changes. The future suddenly feels connected to your present actions. You start asking questions like, what happens if I save $500 every month? What if I invest this? What would $50,000 look like? And these questions start rewiring your brain toward long-term thinking, which is interesting because most wealth isn't built through massive breakthroughs. It's built through long-term thinking repeated over and over again. Saving, investing, waiting. Your brain begins to understand that money isn't just something you earn, it's something you build. Confidence starts showing up in weird places. Here is something people rarely talk about. Saving money doesn't just change how you think about money, it changes how you think about yourself. Because saving $5,000 requires discipline, it requires saying no to things, it requires consistency, and when you prove to yourself that you can do that, your identity shifts. You stop seeing yourself as someone who is bad with money. Instead, your brain starts building a new story. I'm someone who can manage money. And that confidence starts leaking into other areas of life. You negotiate your salary more confidently. You feel more comfortable discussing finances. You become less intimidated by financial topics like investing or taxes. It's not because $5,000 magically changed your intelligence. It's because you proved something to yourself. You proved that you're capable of control. And that realization can be incredibly powerful. The urge to protect your money gets stronger. Another weird psychological change. Once you build savings, your brain starts wanting to protect it. Before savings, spending money might feel neutral or even impulsive. But once you have $5,000 sitting there, purchases start triggering a different reaction. Your brain begins asking questions like, is this really worth it? Do I actually need this? Because now spending doesn't just reduce your balance. It threatens something you worked hard to build, and that protective instinct is actually one of the key drivers behind long-term wealth. Wealthy people aren't just good at making money, they're good at keeping it. And the habit of protecting your savings often begins right around this first milestone, the momentum effect. The final psychological shift is momentum, because once you've saved $5,000, the next goal suddenly feels possible. $10,000 doesn't sound insane anymore. $20,000 starts feeling imaginable. Your brain has proof now. Proof that progress can happen. And progress, once visible, becomes addictive in the best possible way. Saving turns into a game. You start wondering, how far can I take this? How big can this number get? And that curiosity can quietly transform your entire financial future. Conclusion. So here's the interesting part. Saving $5,000 doesn't change your life because of the number itself. $5,000 isn't retirement money. It's not a house. It's not financial independence, but psychologically. It's a turning point because that first real savings cushion tells your brain something it may have never fully believed before. You are capable of building stability. Your brain begins leaving survival mode. You start seeing money as something That can grow instead of something that constantly disappears. You begin thinking about options, not just obligations. The future stops feeling distant and starts feeling connected to your actions today. And maybe most importantly, you start seeing yourself differently, not as someone who is constantly reacting to money problems, but as someone who is slowly, deliberately building control. And honestly, that mindset shift is where most financial journeys truly begin. Because once your brain starts thinking like a builder instead of a survivor, everything changes. So if you're working toward your first few $1,000s in savings right now, and it feels slow or frustrating or honestly kind of pointless sometimes, just know that you're not just saving money. You're rewiring your brain. And once that process starts, the way you think about money may never be the same again.